The story begins with the Duchess, Chloe Vanderberg, but we'll be calling her Chloe for the purpose of this narration. She's gliding down the marble halls of a grand mansion, passing some maids who can't help but smirk in her direction. With each step, she feels the weight of their disapproving gazes, and memories of her tumultuous time in this strange new world come flooding back. It's only been a few days since she arrived, and at first, she was bewildered by the mockery and ridicule she faced from everyone around her, including the spiteful maids. The unfair treatment stoked a fire of anger within her, but as time passed, she learned to bear it with stoic resilience. The mind drifts back to a time, not so long ago, when she was a different person entirely. Park Ha-jeong, who was born and raised in South Korea and had spent her entire life there until just a week ago. In a brief flashback, she remembers her life before this surreal transformation. She was a new employee in an organization, eager to please, and sought approval from her colleagues. Her overeater attitude led her to take on tasks that weren't hers, sacrificing her own time and energy in the process, and even worse, she never received any recognition or credit for her efforts. One day, her colleague handed her a colossal project that he should have completed himself, and when it inevitably failed, she was unjustly blamed and ultimately fired. That night, she drank and cried herself to sleep, vowing to never be a pushover again. But when she woke up, she was in this strange new world, in the body of the mistreated and ridiculed Duchess Chloe Vanderberg, who had been abandoned by her husband. This was the biggest crisis she's ever endured in her entire 28 years of life. As the morning sun rises and the birds sing, Ha-jeong, now Chloe, wakes up in a luxurious bed and realizes that it's been 8 days since she found herself in this new body. She reaches for the bowl of water by her side and dips her hands in, only to be jolted by the icy temperature. She knows that a cold start won't guarantee a good day, but there's one thing she's grateful for: the memories of the original Chloe still in her head. As she delves into the memories, she realizes that her personality was ordinary compared to the real Duchess, who tried to fit in with the crowd, rushed to follow trends, and lost her sense of self. The maids enter her room just then, interrupting her thoughts, and they seem surprised to see her dressed already, as the previous Chloe never dressed herself. As she looks at each of the maids with their smirking faces, she realizes that they're just like her past colleagues who used to mock and ridicule her. When Colin, a head maid, inquires if she dressed herself, Chloe scolds her and warns her not to neglect her duties again, adding that next time she'll not be so forgiving. This statement gets surprise reactions from the maids, as they've never seen this side of the Duchess before. Colin comments that she's different from her usual self, causing her to recall that the head maid used to be the meanest to her, as she used to humiliate her and make fun of her in front of others. She recalls a day when the maids pretended to be nice to the original Chloe, only to abandon her the next day. Recalling all these past humiliations, her anger flares up, and she demands that Colin come closer and slap her hard, shocking the other maids in the room. As her hands connect with Colin's cheek, sending a sharp slap echoing through the room, she delivers a stern warning, commanding her to follow orders or face the consequences, leaving the other maids in shock as they stare in disbelief, unable to believe this new version of the Duchess. After they exit the room, Chloe releases a relieved sigh and clenches her fist in excitement, musing over how she spent decades living for others. But now, by embodying another's persona, she can cause a stir, and despite feeling a twinge of guilt, she convinces herself that she did the right thing. Observing her new world, she notes that here, husbands work in the fields while wives manage households. Unfortunately, the previous Chloe failed to fulfill her duties, outsourcing them to a warden and financial expert, so she pleaded with the staff to keep this away from her husband, and this caused her to relinquish her power to discipline or terminate employees. Back to the present, we see Chloe being visited by one of the maids, Ellie, who is the only person in the mansion who has been by her side. The girl profusely apologizes for mocking her earlier, to which she responds by thanking her, aware that Ellie has been taking care of her despite the potential backlash from the other maids. Later in the day, she decides to take a walk, reflecting on her past life where she had no friends, family, or job to return to. She realizes that while she can't go back to being Park Ha-jong, she can at least be a duchess who isn't belittled or bullied by others. In the thrill of the moment, she also decides that she'll speak with her husband, the Duke, during dinner, and ask him for the one thing that makes her happy, even when she was living as Park Ha-jong. The scene shifts to nighttime, where we see Chloe finally having dinner with the Duke, whose name is Alphonse. They sit across from each other, eating in silence, while she observes him closely and eventually summons her courage and draws attention, telling him that there's something she needs. The Duke Alphonse Vanderburg was a man who had wealth, power, and beauty, but was uninterested in love, so he always rejected all marriage proposals. However, he needed a wife to reach the top, so he decided to get one who wouldn't get in his way. His terms for marriage were simple: a woman from a humble family that would have little influence in the House of Vanderburg and who wouldn't fall for him or interfere with his work. There were no women who could meet his conditions except Chloe, who, with the help of her parents, got into this political marriage with Alphonse. To the Duke, he's been a good husband, having given his wife the amazing position of a duchess, a large, beautiful mansion, hundreds of beautiful dresses, and precious gems. However, to Chloe, he wasn't the best of husbands, starving her of attention and affection and leaving her with nothing but great fear for him. His sharp gaze always intimidated her, so she never dared ask him for anything. Alphonse, having noticed that his wife never asked for anything, didn't think much of it as he thought it was none of his business, which is why he's taken her back today, as after 13 months of being married to him, she's finally summoned the courage to ask him for something. He regards her closely, pondering what she might ask for, assuming that it might be jewelry or new clothes, but she surprises him by requesting tea. Chloe explains that she's always found solace in sipping tea, and she's desperate for any small comfort to ease the weight of their political marriage. She adds that since tea isn't an expensive luxury, it wouldn't be such a large burden on his financial expenses. However, to her surprise, the Duke grants her request and even gives her a budget to order any kind of tea she wants. Overwhelmed with joy, the Duchess can't wait to order as much tea as she wants, and she recalls how before she was reincarnated, she always loved drinking tea, but never had enough money to buy as much as she desired. The next morning, she wakes up to the sound of some maids waiting to tend to her needs, and she's pleased that she doesn't have to wait for them today because, despite their terrible attitudes, she still prefers their help to dress up. Just then, a maid interrupts with the announcement of the arrival of her tea, and Chloe rushes down to receive it with excitement, but is surprised when she sees the number of boxes of tea being loaded into the mansion. Excitement courses through her veins as she gazes at the numerous boxes of tea leaves before her, and she mentally makes a note to thank her husband for the thoughtful gift during dinner. Gathering all the boxes, she heads to her room to prepare her first cup of tea. But on her way, she bumps into Ellie, and wanting to share the experience with someone, she invites the girl to join her, which she declines, citing her duties assigned by the head of the kitchen, Mrs. Miller. Feeling sorry for Ellie, Chloe insists that she accompany her, stating that she's the Duchess and has the right to tell her what to do. As Chloe enters the kitchen, she is met with the stunned gaze of the maids, who were not used to seeing their Duchess in the kitchen. Nervous, Chloe reminds herself to act like it's a presentation, and she tells Mrs. Miller that she's there to make tea. However, the woman isn't very familiar with tea, as coffee is more popular in the Empire. Chloe then requests a copper kettle to boil her tea, but the woman brings an iron kettle instead, stating that they're busy at the moment. However, she refuses to use the iron kettle, explaining that it has low thermal conductivity and will boil the tea slowly, leading to a supple taste. After much insistence, Mrs. Miller relents and brings a copper kettle. After making her tea, she takes a sip and is immediately disappointed as it tastes too bland. She lets out a gasp, causing Ellie to wonder if the tea contains poison. The Duchess explains to her that she's fine, but she deduces that the water used to make the tea is soft water and not hard water. Her mind drifts back to the time when she was still known as Park Ha-jung, reminiscing about the moment when she was given a small amount of funding to travel to England for a brief language course. If you guys are eager for part 2, I kindly request that you leave a comment in the comments box. Your feedback and support are greatly appreciated, and it will inspire me to create the next part exclusively for you guys.